got a deal so far? The Brits,
the Brits
and Vietnam.
Slight deal on the Vietnamese, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm confused. What do you want to say?
The deals that we got, so you started with London, you started with the UK and you started with Vietnam. Are they landmark deals for developed nations and for developing or emerging markets? Is that what we've got? And when it comes to Vietnam, the 20% charge on tariffs, and we heard over the weekend that Trump feels very strongly about BRICS, the developing market model where very cheap product has had to be made in some of these countries, shipped to the United States, upending so-called domestic manufacturing. Keen to correct that. And I think after a very aggressive approach to some of the BRICS, that's what we're hearing. This developing market, emerging market model for the last number of decades could be in doubt here in its context, because there will be tariffs, decent tariffs applied to some of these nations coming in. Whether it brings manufacturing back to the United States, big question mark still dangling, but it means product will become more expensive for Americans no matter how you cut it.
I think you bring up the BRICS, and I think what's essential to think about here when we think about this group of nations, it started as just those 5 nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but it's expanded to include a number of other countries now. And the group is essentially designed to be a Chinese counterbalance to U.S. and broader Western power. And that's an angle through which I think we have to think about President Trump's comments around these BRICS countries, that if you are aligning with them, you are essentially taking an anti-American stance. That's an overlay there. I think one thing that stood out to me looking at the commentary over the weekend is the approach that has been successful with Trump so far, and that is to take a diplomatic approach, not escalate. And this is something you brought up in NATO, that's what pays off with President Trump. That's what paid off in NATO and ultimately got that smooth agreement there. It's taking a diplomatic, not an escalatory approach. And The Economist termed it DOVE, diplomacy over visible escalation. That's the strategy that seems to be working here.
Love a good acronym. I'll pick up with you on the NATO theme as well, because how did NATO going from being, as Macron called it a few years ago, brain dead, to actually being a really quite effective group that more nations like Finland and Sweden, who bring a lot of firepower to the table, wanted to join? How did it go from the two? It had a common enemy that basically made them all sit up and wake up and say, oh yeah, we're really still worried about Russia, ergo we need to up our defence, up our spending, and really get our act together. The BRICS, and again, talking about loving a good acronym, and I'm a big fan of Jim O'Neill. We've spoken to Lord Jim O'Neill many times over the years, but the truth of the matter is, they've got nothing in common, really. I mean, yeah, they're coming from a low economic base. Yeah, they're all industrialising at various stages. But they've got very little in common. And I think, most of the academic and intellectual evidence over the years, they've got a lot in common. So how do we create something in common? You create a common enemy. And to be honest, the BRICS are so easy to split up, for different... They're all got their own vested interests as well. But if Mr. Trump and the US creates a common cause by aligning them all as one and saying, you are all bad, then they suddenly get a purpose. They suddenly have a meaning as well. So we've got to be very careful not to create a relevance for the BRICS where it doesn't exist.
You could say that for Europe as well.
You could say that for all of these multinational organisations, because when I look at the G20, it's pretty useless at having cohesive policy because you've got 20 disparate nations who don't want the same thing. You look at the G7, it's actually pretty useless in many ways as well at getting aligned policy as well. So Trump is doing the polar opposite of what I think he wants to do potentially, and that's creating a meaning for BRICS if he's not careful.
Yeah, the other point I'd make here, there are 18 important trading partners, so that's where the Trump administration has been focused. Where does it leave the rest if you're not on the 18, on the list of 18? In terms of greater market access, that is something the administration's been keen to cut. Trying to get those tariffs down in these emerging markets, allow us to sell US product into these countries. Will they? I mean, will anyone in some of these countries want American product? Will it be the right price and the right type of products?